Robert Weber, CEO of Continuing Electrical Education. Do I got that right?
You did.
Welcome to Shock Week, brother.
Welcome, and thank you for allowing me and humbling me with the privilege.
So, we were going to explore the topic of the qualified person. And I know it's something near and dear to your heart. I know we've had discussions in the past about anytime we bring up this whole discussion, this topic of the qualified person, whether you're looking in the National Electrical Code, 70E, there's so many places in the codes and standards world where we will use the term qualified person. And I know you've commented on that before. So so our topic is on the qualified person. We're going to explore that. And you are the CEO of the Continuing Electrical Education. Is that the company name?
Yep.
Excellent. So why don't we do this? Why don't you just let everybody know who you are and give a little bit of your background?
Okay. Well, Robert Weber, Robert from Omaha, if you're listening to Tom. I grew up on a ranch and was going to be a cowboy. I worked an 18,000-acre ranch with 1,500 head of cattle, 350 head of horses until I was 17. And this guy approached me and he says, "Would you like to help out on a project?" I go, "What's the project?" And he says, "It's a 24-unit apartment building in town." And of course, me and a young kid, not knowing what I had, I decided, well, that's got to be better than cowboy. So I took him up on it. And in 1973, in 1982, I wrote my first contractor's test up in South Dakota. I moved down to Omaha in 1994 and have been here ever since. And about 2006, I would go to code classes and would see code classes and bid jobs. I worked on anything from a Home Depot, the big box store, to Resco Federal Courthouse, federal jobs and substations, just a mix of pretty much anything and everything, a little bit of. And I just got so frustrated because 9 out of 10 times I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue what the code book said. I was an installer. I was not an electrician. And so I started in 2006 to educate myself. And from that point until now, I have gotten the IAEI certification. I've got the NABCEP PV solar inspector certification. I have Nfpa 70E CESCP certification, and I have the ICC certification. And I've got contractor's licenses for 5 different states, which is neither here nor there. I don't compete, I consult.
Wow.
And I keep the license so I can get in there with the contractor and turn a wrench if I need to legally. I talk with electrical inspectors and work with them. I work with power companies here in Nebraska on PV solar because this is all new to this area, right?
Yep.
And the more I'm in this trade, the more excited I get because it's such a fascinating energy. And code geek, just an electrical geek. How about that?
There you go.
And in codes and standards, people seem to have, and this is my opinion. I love the way you say, "This is my opinion." Starts up here, comes out here.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is it so hard to be safe? What is it about safe that people have such a hard issue with? Why do I say it's a hard issue? Well, you know what drives codes and standards, Tom?
What's
Unfortunately,
that? Oh,
statistics.
yeah.
Isn't that
Right.
terrible? Statistics.
You're right.
Okay. Every code and every standard that has been adopted basically has been written in blood and destruction, pretty much.
That's right.
And what challenged me or what kind of baffled me was, um, you know, why is this so hard? Why is this acceptable? Because apparently it is, because it keeps happening.
Yeah.
When 70E came out in 1979, the first first edition. 1976 was when they got together, the technical committee. 75 was when OSHA approached them, right? But what I try to help people do, Tom, is in my classes, is I have them look at the front of the book, the code making panels, those who are responsible for putting this together. And I tell them to look at all the different ones that are involved, from the manufacturers to the IBW to contractors. Look at all the people that are there. These are not rules put together by a government. These are consensus standards from very wise and very sharp individuals. And they've looked at all the data from all parts of the country, and they've come together and have been able to come to a consensus of what the minimum safety requirements are.
That's right.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
So I try to build appreciation, because I firmly believe that part of our job as instructors is not just get information to people, but it's attitude changing.
It's a culture change.
It's a culture change.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so how I try to approach things, and what we're going to go through here on this qualified person, isn't it true that when you hear the term qualified person in a class, the old hair goes up on the back of your neck, and okay, who are you saying is qualified and who ain't? Or I hear this, well, how are you going to enforce that? No, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get you to realistically look at something. Here is something that a consensus of very smart people put into a book as a standard. And this is one of the things that a little saying I like to share. Values are the way things should be. Reality is the way things are. We should always be trying to make the way things are the way they should be.
Yeah, and I think that when your values don't match with what you're doing, you get a bunch of different things. You get some internal strife possibly going on because you're compromising your own values. And then you also get issues with your performance and everything else associated with that, because when you're doing what you believe that you need to do, and you understand what you're doing, then you'll have passion around it and you will do it well. So,
and you will do it in a relaxed manner.
That's exactly right.
If you're not doing it correctly, the anxiety level can cause you to make mistakes and everything, right?
No, you're absolutely right. So, okay. All right. So you are entrenched in education. You're entrenched in changing a culture of electrical safety. And there's a lot of Roberts out there. There's a lot of Toms out there, and that's our mission. Our goal is to save lives through educating others. And now, we're not necessarily creating qualified people.
No, that has to come internally. And one of the primary definitions in my book of a qualified person is someone who could admit that he's not qualified.
Yeah. Well, so that's a very good point, that we need to be able to identify. Yeah. So here's the challenge. I guess the challenging part, because we're getting into this discussion of the qualified person, and we're going to get to the defined terms here shortly, but I think the challenge for us as an industry, and I've heard people say this before, and I never quite understood it until you actually apply it. You don't know what you don't know, right? So if I'm looking at a piece of equipment, I may look at these glasses and say, well, I know what these things are, and I know how they're used, but then I give them to you, and you go, these are special glasses because they perform this, and then you demonstrate to me some feature of these that I didn't even know existed. And then there's that aha moment that, oh, wow, I thought I knew everything about these glasses, but you taught me so much more. So the challenge for us as an industry is to be able to know when you don't know what you don't know. You know?
And look at why were those glasses made? How are they made?
Right.
How are they designed? What went into the design of? I mean, eye research and vision, all that stuff from behind the scenes that we don't appreciate.
Right.
And this is not who knows more than who. This isn't an ego thing. This isn't, trying to put one person above another. The codes and standards are there for us. What kind of like speed limits, for example?
Oh,
They've
absolutely.
set the speed limits for protection of people. Does it infringe on your rights a little bit? Well, yeah, of course, but it's for the benefit of everybody. And when people when you go to qualify somebody, you have everybody brings something to the table.
Is it?
Okay. And what the codes and standards have done is said, well, here's a consensus of what a qualified person should be, what he should meet to a reasonable degree. Now, nobody's going to do it perfectly, right? But just saying that you've had 25 years of experience and no theory and no safety, okay, you know how to do the work, but
Right.
you're not really qualified to do it safely. And safety is the lack of fear from harm, physically, mentally,
Yeah,
and so forth, right? That's what we throw that word safety around all the time, right? We
sure.
don't stop and think, what is it we're saying? Well, I just gave a public talk here at our hall, and I gave it on standards. Okay. And so I said, when you sit in your chair, you fear that your chair is going to collapse and you're going to hit the floor. When you're driving down the road, you fear your car is going to fall apart. In this building, you feel this building is going to fall apart. No, why? Because it was built to a standard.
It's an
There was
expectation. It's a
that's
we.
an expectation.
That's right.
As
We
a,
have that
as a
level of
measure.
expectation.
That's
Absolutely.
right. And a level at which you can measure things to
Yeah.
that has been established by a group of people from all over. It's a consensus of it. And when we get into the discussion on definitions, you're going to smile because in each and every one of these documents, they're all standards, right?
Right.
Whether federal or whatever, they become codes when they're adopted as law. But
Yeah.
because they're not adopted as law, it doesn't mean they're not a standard that we're not supposed to try to meet. Okay. And so this definition of qualified person, if you've got many years of experience or if you have no experience at all,
Yep.
if you're willing to look at what's been put out there in 110.4, take it a step at a time, we'll explain it to you as we go through. But first, we have got to understand, what are we talking about when we talk about a qualified person? What is that? We're not
Okay.
trying to ego things.
That's right. Okay. So let's transition into a discussion about. Now we know that in general, not one person is qualified for everything, and we know that what we do in education, for the most part, in safety awareness, is not creating a qualified person to perform certain functions, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
now we have the term qualified person used in the National Electrical Code and in 70E and in 70B for maintenance. So let's talk about the definition on what is a qualified person. Where would you begin your journey?
Well, way back in 2006, when I began to start educating myself and began to do some investigating on why. I kind of knew what, but I didn't know why. I didn't understand where it was coming from. So if you look at CFR 1910, 399, which is definitions in that particular federal standard, it's on page 468, and it's in subpart S. And interestingly, you know where subpart S, where its origination was for OSHA?
No.
Okay. If you're reading subpart S, you might look and say, hey, this is like reading the National Electrical Code. And it was actually adopted the 1971 National Electrical Code. They took the majority of it and brought it in to subpart S. Now, the reason they went to Nfpa 70 and 70E was because they can't change every 3 years. It literally takes an act of Congress to make a change in the federal document. But what they do is they incorporate by reference. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
So they mention it, okay? And so just because they don't enforce it, okay, it is still recognized by federal courts as a standard to follow and states that they've adopted it.
Mm-hmm.
So in subpart S of CFR 1910, 399, and that's definitions in subpart S, it talks about a qualified person is one who has received training in and has demonstrated skills and knowledge in the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations and the hazards involved. Okay, that's a pretty good definition, right? but it's not a complete definition. There's way, way more to it. That's what we're going to find out. So in every one of these, the common theme is a qualified person is one who has received training in and demonstrated skills and knowledge in. Can you read a book and come to a class and have knowledge?
No. Well,
If you read a book, you'll have knowledge. If you come to a class, you can have knowledge, but you will not have skill.
that's the
You
thing.
can't
So
yeah,
that's the key. I think when you look at that sentence, it says one who has received training. So that's one aspect.
Yep.
And demonstrated skills. So the
Yeah.
question would be, how do you demonstrate a skill?
Well, when we get to that, because after we get through these definitions, let's just
Yep.
go through these definitions. And then what I want to do is have a small discussion, just the one page here. And we're going to talk about knowledge versus skill to help
Okay.
us get the flavor of what's being said here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of times, I'm sure you'll agree with me, we read stuff and we just kind of glaze over because we're focused on something else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what I'm doing is kind of putting the brakes on. Say, wait a second. There's a couple of little features. There's some flowers you need to smell, and some things over here that you need to take note of. Right?
Yeah.
You can't just because that's going to affect us down the road.
Right.
And one thing that I've learned is that if we, as installers and instructors, do not understand what the intent of these standards are, you know who will?
Lawyers.
A prosecuting attorney.
Absolutely right.
You will know every
Yeah.
comma, every sentence, every and, every
Yeah.
or, every maximum, every minimum. So what I try to do is I come at this because being an expert witness and reading those depositions,
Yep.
your heart sinks when you read the contractor's definition or deposition. He has no idea what safety procedures are involved. Some not even knowing why we have arc fault or GFCIs or things like that. And it's very hard to give a prosecuting attorney the ammunition he needs in a case. And once something happens, you can't undo it.
Yeah. That's true.
Right?
That's true.
And it's
Yeah.
not if something's going to happen,
It's when.
it's when it happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
All right. So we have.
that was the first portion on CFR 1910-399. I'm just going to briefly draw attention to Note 1 and Note 2 because they've taken Note 1 and Note 2 of that definition and incorporated it into 70E's definition.
Okay.
And so we'll talk about that. So you see the intertwining that's happening here just on 1910-399 definition. We're coming back to 70E.
So let's do this. Let's do this. So
Sure.
let's just at least state the 70E definition.
Mhm.
Right. So the 70E's definition says one who has demonstrated skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations and has received safety training to identify the hazards and reduce the associated risk.
Do you see the key in there? You see the difference?
So this is what I see. This is what I see.
Yeah.
It says demonstrated skills. So both
Right.
1910 and 70E say demonstrated skills.
Yes.
It says and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment. That's not in the OSHA. Oh, yes, it is. It is
in the OSHA, and you're on
Knowledge.
the right track because look at the rest. Look at the last part. Has has knowledge and skills in the hazards involved. Let's put that way. In the hazards involved, 70E says how to avoid the risk.
Yeah.
Not just the hazards involved. So in OSHA, it tells you can identify them. Doesn't tell you what else to do.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so the qualified person in 70E, one who has demonstrated skills and knowledge, we know that. That's the same as
Right.
1910, related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations. That was also in 10.
Right.
And it says has received safety training to identify the hazards and reduce the associated risk.
Key thing right there. Yeah.
That's
It
the
goes a
stuff.
step further than OSHA.
Right.
It enhances OSHA. And remember,
Yes.
OSHA tells you what to do. 70E tells you how to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was always interesting because anything that is in 70E is already a rule in OSHA.
Right. And that's a subtle but yet very important difference in the defined term of qualified person. Okay, so
Yeah.
1910 399. Did you want to go into the two notes?
Well, the two notes, I'm just going to hit the gist of them because they talk about the fact that you could be considered qualified with regard to certain equipment in the workplace, but unqualified for other portions. And in note 2, it talks about an employee undergoing on-the-job training. So when we get to 110.4, we're going to see that come back again, but it's rooted in OSHA right here.
Okay.
And so it's always nice to have that ammunition or to have that. We're like putting bricks on the foundation, right?
Yes.
Of an electrical safety program. So here's two great bricks. Now in CFR 1926, 0.499, that is definitions in your construction OSHA. That's going to be on page 282 in subpart K. Okay.
Right.
And that basically says, see if this sounds familiar. A qualified person is one familiar with the construction and operation of the equipment and the hazards involved.
Wow, that's
familiar is a little different flavor.
I mean,
not quite as, you see what I'm saying?
So that is, I mean, that's a very short one, familiar with the construction and operation of equipment and the hazards involved. There's nothing about demonstrating a skill.
Exactly. And nothing about safety.
And there's nothing about recognizing hazards.
Exactly. Okay.
It's just you need to be familiar with the construction and operation of the equipment.
Yeah. So as an architect, you're a designer, are you familiar with it? Yeah. You can go out there, according to that, you can go out there and do whatever you want and meet that standard.
Now, it does say, and the hazards involved. So,
right.
You have to be familiar with the construction, operation, and the hazards. Right. But there's no demonstration of skills and things like that.
Yep. Okay. So now if you look at NFPA 70, Article 100, definition of a qualified person.
Oh, that's right. NFPA 70?
70.
Okay, the National Electrical Code.
Yep. One who has skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations and has received safety training to recognize and avoid the hazards involved. Well, what about the hazards that you can't avoid? Well, 70E says reduce the risk. Example, voltage measurement. You have to have it on to take a voltage measurement. How are you going to reduce the risks that are involved? Because it has to be on because you're measuring voltage. A qualified person will know what to do, is what we're saying. And this is another brick to go with the other two. And so they're basically got one theme here, right? You need to know the equipment, you need to know the systems. And what I found missing in here was the wiring or the methods of accomplishing the work. Does that make sense? Because part of the hierarchy of risk control methods, substitution is either you substitute the way you're doing the work with a different work method.
Uh-huh.
So work method, not wiring method, but work methods, a qualified person should know how and when to employ those particular qualities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So let me ask you this. Before I go there, I noticed you're looking up, but the camera is down.
Yeah, no, because I'm watching the reaction on your face.
Yeah. So try to look at the camera more often.
Okay.
Just because when you're on the screen, you're always going to be looking up.
Well, see, Tom, that happens when you're talking to God. What can I say?
I'm with you. Okay, so now having had that discussion, we went over the qualified person in the NEC. Mm-hmm. We went over the qualified person in 70E. Mm-hmm. The qualified person in 1910 and in 1926. We saw the differences there. Now, there's one more defined term, but before we get there, here's where my head is going, Robert, is that the National Electrical Code is an installation requirement, right?
Yeah.
So for me, and where my head's at, my thought process is that a qualified person for the National Electrical Code should be a person who knows how to install products, right? Because the National Electrical Code is not the is not a maintenance document. It's not all these other types of documents. I have to be able to install something safely. Now, that might be different than, say, 7DB, which is a maintenance personnel. A maintenance person may not need to know how to install something, but a maintenance person sure better know how to properly maintain a piece of equipment. And then 70E is the generic requirements that no matter what you're doing, you need to make sure you are doing whatever it is safely, whether you're installing something, maintaining something, or demolishing something.
Exactly. And that's why we're taking the definitions from all of these, because who qualifies those people? If you were tasked with qualifying people in these different areas, how would you go about doing it? And remember, if you're qualifying them for the job, you're on the hook. When something goes wrong, it's all going to come back to, well, who gave the qualification to this person? Now, you made a statement earlier that we don't qualify people. We do not. We bring the information and the measurements to them. We don't build houses. We build the specs to them. And then people build houses.
Right.
And that's what's so beautiful about what you said about 70E. It's a book of ingredients. Okay?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Don't make your 70E verbatim to what your electrical safety prep. No, you got your company, design your company, and then make sure that what you got in there meets the minimum requirement.
Okay.
Right? But how do you know what the minimum requirements are? Well, you got to do a little research like you do with anything else.
Well,
you're gonna,
you have to be
build something.
you have to be qualified. So even to use the document, you need to be qualified. So if I'm using the National Electrical Code, or I'm using I'll say, not necessarily 70E, but my safety plan, I need to be qualified to understand my safety plan. I may not be qualified to understand 70E and put a safety plan together, but I have to be qualified on my safety plan to know how to properly do work per the safety plan, which was built based upon.
And those are minimum requirements. You can always do. I like what you said here today. You like your house code plus.
Yeah, I do.
Right. You put GFCI and the code didn't require it, but you put code plus. Now, going back to this, if we don't understand a prosecuting attorney well, I ask this question: who do you think is going to have a little better chance of a second chance? Somebody who tries his best to get the knowledge and put it to practice best he can, makes a mistake, or somebody that just blew it off because we don't need that. Which one do you think the jury is going to take a look at? Because nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
But you showed your intent by doing your due diligence and trying to learn the best you could, because the sanctity of life, I'm going to use that. Sanctity of life, it's important. It should be important to anybody and everybody. So as we look at these definitions, you brought up the point that whoever it's the installer, whoever it's the OSHA or whatever, or the maintenance person, those that are going to qualify those people and tell them, go ahead and work on that based on their qualification that they've demonstrated. Okay, how's the person that's doing that going to know what qualities are what? What do I measure it to? So by going through these definitions, now we've got a pretty good idea of what a qualified person kind of needs to be.
We got one more term, one more definition. We didn't do 70B yet.
Yeah, 70B, that's where I was headed.
Okay.
So in Nfpa 70B, not in Article 100.
No.
Okay, it's in Chapter 3.
Yeah.
I did that specifically. I listened to you, Tom. Yeah. Okay, Chapter 3, it's 3.3.47. And that definition, again, follows a theme, but the theme, you've got to look at the enhancements around it in each one of these to help you get the full impact of what is a qualified person, okay? It says one who has, demonstrated skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations, and has received safety training to identify the hazards and reduce the associated risks. So very close to 70E, reducing risks and so forth, because there's times when you can't get rid of the hazard.
That's extracted text. Look, if you look at the term, so it has in brackets 70. So here's what I like about the 70B, extracted the text from 70E, so it's consistent. The National Electrical Code did not do that.
No.
The NEC just has an informational note is to say, hey, go see 70E for safety training requirements. But I think it would now, but see, here's where my head's at. Is it correct to be consistent in what a qualified person is between 70E, 70, and 70B when each document addresses something different? Is the qualified person really different? Should the definition be different for a person who is doing work per 70B or installations?
A qualified person is a qualified person. Let's call a spade a spade.
Okay. All right. Well, but I think that had to be said. I think it had to be said because part of me, when you say knowledgeable, well, when I look at, if I go back to the 70E and 70B, demonstrated skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment. Well, what about the installation? And installations. So even if I'm installing it, I still want to be knowledgeable of the construction and operation.
Yep. Because at some point you're going to go back and repair something somewhere.
Absolutely. And if I'm
or maintain something somewhere, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when I'm installing it, if I don't understand the function of it, then I may there may be 5 different ways you can install a product.
Yeah.
And depending upon the application, depending upon how it's going to be used, then you pick whichever one makes sense.
Are you going to have your apprentice call that shot, or are you going to get somebody like yourself?
Well, you don't want me doing it. I'm worse.
You know what I mean? You know your product and so forth. That's what I'm saying. So here's the question, Tom, that's kind of dancing around the room. Yeah, we've got to be qualified. We have to demonstrate this. My question is to who?
Okay, so
who are we demonstrating this to? Well, it's going to have to be the person you're doing the work for, the owner, because he's the one that's going to be held accountable for OSHA, right? Something along that. Does that make sense to you?
It does. So don't we find something in 110 of 70E?
Yeah, that's where we're going to get to. That's why I posed the question.
Okay, perfect. So if I'm not mistaken, 110.4. What's 110.4? Training requirements.
Training requirements.
But then,
can I just, before we get into 110.4,
please,
to round out this particular portion of the definitions, can I read this last page? And this is just information for you to consider. So if you got that page on your computer, knowledge versus skills, right? Train. The definition or the meaning to train is to teach a person a particular skill or behavior through instruction and practice over a period of time. All right. So if you read a book or come to a class or a program, that's good for the instruction. But to be fully trained, you need to practice that instruction over a period of time to gain the skill. Skill doesn't come automatically. Okay, that's kind of the theme of this thing. So now you can acquire knowledge through education, whereas gaining skill requires practice. Now, in every one of the definitions, skills and knowledge have been in each and every one of those definitions, right? Skills and knowledge.
Right.
And one of the reasons they may have done that is most states will require for you to take the test that you have skills and knowledge. You can't just read a book and have no field experience. You see what I'm saying?
You know what?
People can read the National Electrical Code book and go pass the test.
You know what's a good example? We both play guitar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I could sit down and take a class, and they could tell me the fretboard, and I can put my fingers on there and put a D out and put a G and a C.
Yeah.
But that does not make me Eddie Van Halen.
No, it doesn't make you a songwriter either.
Exactly right. So, but what if I want the skill level of an Eric Clapton or any of those players,
or a qualified guitar player?
I need
You have to practice that knowledge
practice, right? I need to sit
over
down.
time.
I need to sit down with that
Yeah.
guitar and I need to play with it. I need to try different levels of music, different types of music, and I need to work the fretboard. So it's the same deal with electrical safety and like a qualified electrician or a qualified maintainer. You
Yep.
need to have that exposure, and it's like you just don't go to one class and you're done. You
Yep.
need to actually physically, I always talk about the different senses.
Mhm.
I can hear it, I want to see it, and then I'm going to get my hands on it so
And then you
that
want to feel it.
that's exactly right. You want to work with the equipment so that you can feel the heaviness of the panel doors. And I could tell you it's 12 pounds, but if you've never held 12 pounds,
Yeah.
it means nothing to you. And if you're a kilogram person in Canada or some other country, you're gonna go, what the heck is a pound?
Something really heavy.
It's something really heavy. That's some heavy
Like,
stuff.
what's going to happen to that smart meter? It's going to burn it up.
Yeah.
So in this particular juncture, I want to slide something in here. These are just things to think about, guys. We're not here beating you over the head with rules and things.
Sure.
We want you to think about this information. We want you to have information to think about. Okay.
Right.
So what about the need for mentorship?
Okay.
You know what I mean? That's a whole different thing, but I want to slide it in here because we have a lack of skilled individuals in the trades. Why? Why aren't we mentoring people? That's kind of like a thing of the past, it seems like.
So when you say mentoring, in my mind, there are different levels of mentoring.
Yes.
I could call you for advice on how would you
Sure.
handle this situation. I could give you my
Mhm.
situation. I could also ask you for career advice and say, look, I want to be an astronaut. Where do you think I should start? And if you're an astronaut, you could relate because you could help me understand
Mhm.
your journey, right?
Mhm.
Not that is my journey. But then there's another mentorship, which could be on the job site to where
Exactly.
you're watching a person work and okay, so
Not just watching them work,
no, I know,
but
but
adjusting. Like if you're going to bend a piece of pipe, right? Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you're right. You're going down the exact same road that I was saying. It's
Yeah,
it's
the client's not
interaction,
bending the pipe for him. He's not micromanaging it,
right?
but he's helping him make the marks. He's helping him set the bender. He's explaining to him. He's demonstrating. Then he's letting that person practice.
Right.
And if companies would have a mentorship program so that they've got people who've been there for a while with demonstrated qualifications, okay, the new guys,
Yep.
pair them up and start building your company through mentorship type of things. That makes sense?
Yeah. Now here's the thing, and so I can mentor you if I was on a job site and you were going to take a cover off of a panel board, okay,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
said, "Hey, Robert, hold on. Let me just give you some advice. Let me tell you some experience that I've had. This has happened to me before. Here's what you should do first. The
Mhm.
first thing you have to overcome is the ability to not, is your ability to accept criticism
Yes.
and to be open to another way of doing something you may have done for 20 some years. Okay. And I have a session with Vincent Barlow. Okay. And Vince, he wrote a book called Becoming Unshakable. And it's the power of emotional intelligence. And Annex Q, if I'm not mistaken, it's Q of NFPA 70E speaks to this. So, so when we talk about mentorship, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to say, I'm going to accept mentorship.
Yes. And then you also need to be trained on how to give it.
Oh,
Because there's some people that just treat people like
you are absolutely right.
We didn't want to go too far that direction, but we're on the trail there.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons the way that we can do this and have it acceptable is by a consensus standard that people have researched. This went to .4, and Annex Q. Okay. And maybe basically that's what the code definition is telling us, or whenever there's a code section for a qualified person, we don't take that seriously. We just figure if he knows how to do it, good enough. No, there's way more to it. We're going to find that out. And once you get into the trail of it, whatever, once you get into it, it takes a little bit to examine it and get trained. But once you're there, it's just like you got trained to do the job you were doing. We all became electricians. Don't look at it as overwhelming. Look at it as amazing, right?
Yeah.
You know how to eat an elephant, Tom?
One bite at a time.
There you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. Okay, so a little bit more here. I want to try and I'll just read through the rest of this and try not to go down into the weeds. Okay, so under knowledge and skill, awareness of anything is labeled as knowledge. On the other hand, skill is defined as the process of acquiring ability through a lot of practice and hard work. I like that one. Theoretical understanding, which is knowledge, turned into practical application of such knowledge is skill. Knowledge provides a strong foundation of understanding. Skill brings practical application to that knowledge. Knowledge is not enough to possess one without the other. Remember the old soup and sandwich jingle? Soup and sandwich? Okay. So to demonstrate that for just a quick illustration, if you're standing in the middle of a busy street, knowledge will tell you that you could get hit and get killed.
Sure.
But skill is going to cause you, or wisdom is going to cause you to move or to act upon that correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. So skills are demonstrated capabilities required to perform tasks accurately, whether they're mental, emotional, physical, psychological, etc. Knowledge signifies the understanding of a subject matter, recognizing differences in terms of skill and knowledge. Knowledge refers to familiarity with factual information. Skills refers to the demonstrated ability to apply knowledge to a specific situation or condition. Skills without knowledge may result in a superficial proficiency. Small amounts of knowledge can mislead people into thinking they are more expert than they really are, which can lead to mistakes and disasters.
That is so true. That is so true.
So I just thought bringing some different definitions from not only the code books, from the dictionary and things like that, it gives us a little more fleshed out picture of what we're talking about with a qualified person. And then we're not trying to put one person above another.
No.
Right?
Right.
This is, I don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to get across, but I think you catch what I'm saying. And that would eliminate people hearing up and saying, don't tell me I'm not a qualified person. I've been doing this for 25 years.
That's right. That's right.
No, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to appeal to you and show you here is a way to demonstrate what a qualified person is.
I love it. Oh, you're absolutely. I like it. I like it a lot. Now, do we want to go through talk?
So let's go to 110.4.
Training requirements.
Start there on training requirements, because if we don't do that, we're going to be into a whole 6-hour class.
Yeah.
So let's just go over it.
So let's do this.
You this morning, you spent too much time on 210.8.
Yeah. Well, you know what the problem with that was all of the. I mean, you know. Yeah, it's like 210.8. There's A, B, C, D, E, and F. So 110.4 is electrical safety training is A. B is lockout, tagout procedure training.
Right. We're going to go through
and
A.
C. Yeah. So I just want to highlight these are the first level subdivisions.
Right.
C is emergency response training.
Yep.
And I think that's it. So you have emergency response training, you have lockout, tagout procedure training, and then A, the meat of what we want to talk about is electrical safety training.
What training? See, 110.4 has the title training requirements. They're not training options. They're not training suggestions. They're training requirements, right?
Yeah.
And so in the parent text there, it talks about the importance of these training requirements, why it's important. Now, we're not going to look at that or focus on that right here at this point, because I want to spend more time on the qualified person. But do not underestimate it. Don't push it off to the side. Make sure that you read, and if this term helps you, read and savor of what is being said. Now, when
You
you
know what?
savor a meal, you really enjoy that meal.
Yes, exactly. But
So,
here's an important thing. I want to just real briefly. The
mhm,
parent text of A, it says the very first sentence, the
mhm,
training requirements contained in 110.4a shall apply to employees exposed to an electrical hazard
yes, yes,
when the risk associated with that hazard is not reduced to a safe level by the applicable electrical installation requirements.
yes,
So if I'm doing an installation and is my building does not have power from anything. Okay, I'm pulling wire, I'm things. That's not what we're talking about here at
no,
70E. You're
no,
not talking about
no,
training somebody to install something
no,
that is already in an established
yeah,
already in an electrically safe work condition.
yes.
I mean, I just when I read that,
You're still going to talk about safety, but a different type of safety, like ladder
right?
safety and like hammer safety and like, lifting
Yes,
safety. Yeah, still safety, but we're focusing on electrical safety
that's right.
around energized electrical circuit parts and conductors. Now, the reason 70E said circuit parts and conductors, that isn't just panel boards,
Oh
that
no,
isn't
that's right.
just breakers, that isn't just, it's energized circuit parts and conductors. Could be a relay, could be taking a four-square junction box cover, you got energized conductors
That's
or
right.
wire weight. That's a point that I think people miss a lot also.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the idea. And it says going on there at the bottom, it says they shall be trained in safety related work practices and procedural requirements.
Yes.
What is a procedure?
Well, when I hear procedural requirements, I'm thinking of establishing an electrically safe work condition is a procedural, and I need to understand that procedure. It could
Okay.
be um, procedures for my own company to say, here's how you're supposed to function. You're donning your personal protective equipment, how you put it on.
Okay. You're pretty close there. You're pretty close.
Okay.
Okay. That's practice. A
Ah.
procedure is a written
Oh,
practice.
yes. You're right. Yes, absolutely
So you
right.
see what happens there, Tom, as we look at that
Yeah.
word, and we got to be trained to read the code because the code says what it means and means what it says. But if we don't put meaning into it, people continue to go on and miss those points. So
Yeah.
that means you should have a written document of electrical safety practices, which are called procedures because they're written. Does that make sense?
I think it makes a lot
Okay.
of sense.
And then,
Okay.
as necessary, to provide protection from electrical hazards associated with their respectable job or task segments. Now, employees shall be trained to identify and understand. Now, there's a big word. You can identify a lot of stuff, but you might not understand what the meaning.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So, to understand the relationship between the electrical hazard and personal injury.
Possible
Now, as we
injury.
go through parenthetical 1 here, and then we get into parenthetical C on emergency response, you see how this is beginning to kind of tie together here. The picture is beginning to unfold a little more clear. And a lot of times when we're doing our classes, you only got 6 hours. Well, no, I'm getting ready to do an 18-hour training course for this class to take them a walk through each and every one of these things. Because again,
Mhm.
if they don't know, prosecuting attorney will,
That's
and I
right.
always, if you I try to teach my students that when you get up in the morning and you go out that door, put your tools on, you are taking people's life and property into your hands.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yes. The
Okay.
moment you get in the car, and
That's
it may
right.
not be an electrical hazard, but the moment you get
Yep.
in a vehicle and assume
Yep.
driving on a road,
Yep.
you are
What
placing.
you did or didn't do, or what
That's
you
right.
should or shouldn't have done. It works both ways. Well, how are you going to even be aware of that? You see, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely
Well,
right.
now we're learning what we don't know that we should know, and we're trying to put some sense into it. And again, it's under things like this, like you guys are doing with Shock Week, and like you do at the IEEI at 1 hour
Right.
every Tuesday. It's a little dose. It's like
Yeah.
eating the souffle of the week.
I love it. I
We
love
need to
it.
savor and the information and the knowledge and expertise that you and everybody brings to that.
Yeah.
It's just like life saving, nutritious food to keep people out because there's tons of people out there doing work that are busy,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
but they don't know what they don't know. Okay.
Yep.
So
All
now,
right. So item one is qualified
Yep.
person. And
qualified person.
we have some parent text, and we have A, B, C, D, E, and F for the
Correct.
qualified person.
Okay. Yeah. And so the qualified person says a qualified person shall be trained. There's that word shall.
Yep.
And knowledgeable, which means he will take classes and he will demonstrate, learn to demonstrate practice. Okay. In the construction operation of equipment or a specific work method. Let that sink in. A specific
Okay.
work method. Okay. Let's think about it. Okay. And be trained to identify and avoid electrical hazards that might be present with respect to that equipment or work method. Now, one of the things that we will learn in our verifying absence of voltage, right, 120.5 or 120.6 now, is that we need to verify absence of voltage at every point of work.
Yep.
Remember that new line that they put in there?
That's right. Yes. Yes.
So we're beginning to get a glimmer of that. It'll explain it a little later. We won't get to it here. But look at the first one there. It says, such a person shall be familiar with the proper use of applicable cautionary techniques. How many people in businesses are trained in cautionary techniques or precautionary techniques? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and it says further, electrical policies. And then it goes on to say procedures, PPE, insulating materials, shielding materials, and insulated tools and test equipment.
Yeah.
Well, right there, how many of the individuals in the workplace working for people with electricity meet the standards?
That's yeah.
I mean, do you see the magnitude of it? And we're not trying to scare people. We're just trying to develop an appreciation for make an effort, learn. Don't just go out there. I had an old electrician tell me, don't go out there and wire that thing like you're killing snakes.
Like you're killing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Let's
I love it.
slow down a little bit, see where we're at, what we need to do, kind of how we need to get there. All right. So even in that first part, and when I tell people when I put these classes on, what I tell the individuals, and I say this with the highest respect because they do a great job. Don't ever let people forget they're doing a great job.
Oh yeah.
Let's
Right.
enhance that and let's do a better job. Let's take the values of the way things are, the way they should be. Let's bring it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So the next one says that in B, a person shall be
Qualified.
I need to turn my light on so I can read.
Yeah.
shall be qualified or can be qualified. Can you read that for me? Because
Yeah. A person shall be qualified for certain equipment and tasks to be performed. So that's like you may be able to drive a car, but not be able to drive a Mack truck. You have to be trained on that. I might be qualified for a residential panel board, but not a motor control center.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Okay. And then C says such a person permitted to work within the limited approach boundary. There's our first introduction to a boundary.
A boundary.
What is the limited approach boundary? And if they don't know what that is, then why are you working in electrical? Because that's the voltage boundary.
It's based on voltage and it's primarily shock related.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you want to make sure that the person who is in that limited approach boundary is qualified to be able to recognize the hazards and
to recognize them.
Yes, and all of that, and not touch the live
shiny parts. Don't touch the shiny parts.
Don't touch the shiny parts.
So, we'll go through these next ones here, and then I'm going to use an illustration that I hope it has an impact. I'll set you up for that just a moment here. Okay, so such person permitted. Then it breaks that down. Such a person, that's in parenthetical C, permitted to work within the limited approach boundary shall be at a minimum, additionally be trained in all of the following 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That's right.
Now, when you take a walk through 1, 2, 3, and 4, skills and techniques necessary to distinguish exposed, energized electrical conductors and circuit parts from other parts. Okay, maybe you're going to meet some of these.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can meet all of them to a certain extent. But did you know that's what's involved in being a qualified person? And if you don't meet one of these, if you don't meet two of these, does that make you a qualified person? Not necessarily, because it said they need to be trained in knowledgeable in all of these.
Right.
So the next one is skills and techniques necessary to determine the minimal voltage. Okay. 3 is approach distances in table 130.4E, which is our voltage, right?
That's right.
AC and DC, little a, little b. Okay.
Right.
How to use the tables. And then in D, it really, really gets down
D.
to a qualified person. I'm sorry, number 4.
Number 4. Okay. Yeah.
Number 4. Okay. It says decision-making process necessary to be able to do the following. And then it's got A, B, C, and D. Now you look at each and every one of those. That takes some pretty in-depth training in terms of, courses, but mentoring or being taught and demonstrating skill in all these areas. Am I articulating that right?
No, yeah.
Huge.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You're right.
And we kind of try to blow by this, and we don't, but this is what it say.
So
Now, what I love about
So
go ahead.
4 is saying decision-making process necessary to be able to do the following. So it's a decision-making process necessary to perform a job safety planning.
Okay, and
Decision.
that's going to be over in
I'm doing.
one. Yep.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
You said it's going to be over in where?
Well, where we do the job briefing and job planning.
Yes.
Okay, and there's an annex in the back that will give you an example of that.
Yep. And it's the decision-making process necessary to identify electrical hazards. And you have the decision-making process necessary to assess the associated risk, and a decision-making process necessary to select the appropriate risk control methods from the hierarchy of controls identified in 110.3H3, including personal protective equipment. Just those.
Yes.
That's a lot.
It is.
That is a
See, what is
lot.
risk?
Yeah.
What is risk? The likelihood of occurrence and the severity of the outcome.
That's right.
And so you're not going to have an apprentice be making these decisions. You're not going to have a journeyman be making these necessarily. A supervisor, there should be some. What it's giving us is a template to train our people, not just in the parts and pieces we're connecting up, but how to work with them safely. 70 shows how to install safely. 70, how to work safely with them.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So now, parenthetical D, the question comes up with at this point, well, man, how in the world are we ever going to train people if we can't? If they have to meet all of this stuff? Well, parenthetical D kind of says it all. And so this will tie back to OSHA 1910, 399, notes 1 and 2. So it says there, an employee who is undergoing on-the-job training for the purpose of obtaining the skills and knowledge necessary to be considered a qualified person. Now, that's the first thing. That must be his focus, his primary focus. That's his reason. And when in the course of such training, demonstrates an ability to perform specific duties safely at his or her level of training. Now, I stop here and I ask people, are there some people that just shouldn't have a screwdriver in their hand? I mean, it's not their fault. They just shouldn't have a screwdriver in their hand.
Yeah.
Right? Well, so there's a decision-making process in this, but this is an opening to get more qualified people. And then it goes on and says, and who is under the direct supervision, a mentor, if you will, direct supervision of a qualified person. Guess what? He shall be considered a qualified person for the performance of those specific duties. Now, when we get into the restricted approach boundary where no unqualified person can be there, well, if he's in training for those specific things, he is considered qualified for that task of measurement. So you see how they're able.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense now.
So then it goes on through and it talks in parenthetical C, employees shall be trained to select appropriate test instruments. So, how many people have read the information on a test instrument? How many people have read the manufacturer's instructions that come with it? How many people have gone to the site of the meter and looked at those free videos that will tell you exactly what's going on and the dangers, category 1, category 2, category 3, category 4? Do most
Right.
electricians even consider that?
That's a good point. And you look at how many people are injured on tools, on measurement equipment. There are, I mean, Donnie's accident.
Yeah. Yep.
If you
I've
just
seen it.
think about Donnie's accident, he picked the wrong tool up, right? And
Yeah. Yep.
you could argue he's used that tool before, and I know he was in a
Right.
hurry, the whole bit.
Right.
But
Right. Yep.
you know, there there should be a level. I mean, just understanding the magnitude of what can happen if you use the wrong tool should raise your awareness
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
and
Well, you get into the different categories, and you have voltage surges. Even on single phase panels, you can arc between, those voltage surges that take 240 up higher. For that instant, that air gap could become a conductor.
that's right.
It only takes a split second, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And so, or little things like you remember the old fluorescent lights
Oh
with
yeah.
the ballast? Okay, so what was the input voltage?
Well,
Usually?
the input voltage is
Yeah.
120 volts.
Okay, what's the output?
Oh yeah, that's right. Because you're
It's the whole thing. So if you're out
absolutely
there and it's raining and you're trying to test a socket with that thing on, and you've got a meter that's rated 1,000 or 600 volts, and you got
yeah.
1,500 available, I have yet to find a company, electrical company, that makes sure that the people that are working for them using meters will even have a clue.
You're exactly right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
So
and
we're just
just like using those proximity
yeah,
testers, I'll never forget. I was at an IEI function, and you know how they have those giveaways, right? So they
oh
pulled
yeah,
my name out, and I went up, and on the table was one of those proximity testers. So I grabbed it, and I went back to sit down at the table, and I was with somebody who said, "Give me that." And I said, no, this is mine. He goes, you're not qualified to have that. And I was
yep,
like, well, what are you talking about? And he asked me a couple questions
yep,
that I had no clue the answer to. And he was
yep,
like, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And I was
yep,
like, I never
yeah,
knew that, and then when you read the instructions on how to properly
yeah,
use that piece of equipment, that test instrument,
yep,
I had opened my eyes because I thought,
yeah,
well, all I got to do is hold this next to it and I'm good to go.
yeah.
Well,
It's the whole yeah,
it depends.
yeah. Well, you got to be grounded first, and people don't realize that. And when I say people, I mean it in a good way. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're extending probes to there, and that's like extending your hands because they're in your hand.
Oh yeah,
And if those
absolutely.
leads aren't in good condition, or if you have 1,000 volts at the terminals and
Yeah,
600-volt leads, and your meter's 1,000 volts,
you're
I mean,
right.
you got to look at all of that information. And in general, most individuals are not taught to do that. You know how many people don't know why, or how many electricians don't know why we have black and red leads?
Really?
Yeah, for
Okay.
DC,
Yeah.
red's positive, black is negative. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any difference on AC, but nobody, you know,
Yeah.
I'll ask that in a class,
Sure.
and nobody knows why they're black and red. They just work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the meter is multifunction, so
Right,
you got to
right,
pick two colors. You got to
right.
pick either
But
black and red or
yeah,
black
but
and white. But no matter whatever two colors you pick, in some cases, it's not going to match what you're putting it on.
exactly. And then you also have to know that on the meter there's a dial for DC and AC.
That's exactly right, and amps too,
You know,
right? So
yeah.
you got
And,
if
and and recognizing when you're in a situation like I read an account or an incident where I was testing for voltage on a transformer, and they had 4160 coming in on the primary, 480 on the secondary,
yeah,
and he got on the wrong terminals.
ouch,
Yeah. Okay, but he hadn't been trained. Yet,
right?
they don't send people into a war until they send them to boot camp, how to run the gun, how to hide, how to do this, all that. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be sending people into the workforce without some sort of knowledge to protect themselves.
Yeah, you're
That's
absolutely right.
just my personal opinion on it.
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so then it goes down, and in parenthetical F, it says the employer shall determine through one, regular inspections, or through inspections conducted on at least an annual basis that each employee is complying with the safety related work practices required by the standard. So it's giving us direction here.
Yeah,
Over time, the intensity of what people are focused on, you get used to it and you divide your attention. Attentional deficit syndrome, right? I always like to go
yeah,
like this. When you're first learning how to do a project, boy, you're right intent. You're going to make it sure just right. You're listening to what the guy is telling you. You're doing it right. Okay, so now you've done this for 2 days. You didn't count wrong. Now you've done it for 3 days. Okay, now you're going to do it for 4 days. And here's Bill. Hi, Bill. What happened? You
that's
shifted
right.
your attention, right? And then pretty soon you're carrying on a conversation, right? While you're working with something and you know what's going to happen. It's a matter of time. Boom, something happens because your attention wasn't focused. So
That's right.
you're trained to do those types of things.
Yeah, you're right. And the employer has to, you have to have something in here that the employer is checking to make sure that,
It's just a check sheet.
yeah,
We're not, this isn't the law. We're not going to throw you in jail, but this is a
yeah,
way to measure, to make things the way things are the way they should be. This is
that's
where
right.
they should be.
But how do you, so this says the employer shall determine through regular supervision or through inspections
Mhm,
conducted on at least an annual basis that
mhm,
each employee is
mhm.
complying with the safety related work practices.
Yep.
So,
Each employee that's interacting with the task that they're doing, because if you look at two, there's the unqualified person.
yeah, so the employer is going to have something in place
Yep.
to document
Yes.
and then witness that
Yes.
each employee, it doesn't say
Yes.
in general, it doesn't say
Yep.
10% of your employees.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't say 20%. It says each employee is
Yes.
complying
It
with the
does.
safety related work practice. I
Yep.
mean, that's a lot of burden on the employer's shoulders as well.
Absolutely. It's the burden on the employer to provide all this stuff, the training, everything. It's the employee's responsibility to use it correctly.
And only on an annual basis. So,
Yeah. Well, that's the minimum, right?
yeah,
We could
that's
do
right.
it
Yeah,
every 6 months, right? We could
that's
do it
true.
with every, like you were saying with the NFPA 70B maintenance. If you do it every year, even though it's required every 5 years, every year you're out of the game, right?
Yeah.
The frequency of it now is affected, type of thing.
And you have to figure out what is it that you're doing. Is it that
Exactly.
you are going to have somebody who works for your company go to the job site, walk around, do
Mhm.
some inspections, just witness that they're wearing proper PPE?
Document.
Yeah, you could take photos, you could
Yep.
take video, you could have a drone and just say, I'm going to fly a drone over the area and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
review that
Yep.
data later. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of different ways that they could
Exactly.
achieve
And
F.
is it going to cost a little bit of money? Probably.
Yeah.
But look at the alternative. What does a lawsuit cost? Okay. What is going to a funeral cost? What does it go? How would you feel to have to go to the family of this individual that was working for you and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't have a safety plan." You know, I
Yeah.
mean, you
Or I
can't
could,
describe.
I mean, even if nobody gets killed and or
Yeah,
injured,
yeah,
let's say that you cause a delay in
yeah,
getting the
exactly.
building up. It
Yeah,
doesn't have to be that somebody's getting hurt. You could say, look, we did things X, Y, and Z, and we screwed up, and
yeah,
now so and so broke a piece of equipment,
yeah.
and now we've got to get a replacement, so we're delayed by X amount of months, and that costs money that disappoints everybody. So,
Well, and think of this: scheduled outage versus an unscheduled outage.
right, yeah,
So, some of the companies, I will ask this question if there's any accountants in the room, and
hmm,
I'll say, "How much would you lose in money for
yeah,
every minute or every day that, regardless of what's happened, that you lose, right?" And then it becomes a different scenario, right? Remember, you were talking about the guy that talked to his people one way and his accountants the other way,
Yeah.
and that's how he was able to get, funding for safety and so forth. And it's just stating facts. It's not trying to browbeat people. It's just stating facts. It's either one or the other. I
Yeah.
mean, every action has an equal but opposite reaction. Right?
Absolutely right.
So part of that, we'll go back to 110.3, which we jumped over to get to here. And so just briefly, it goes through the types of training and the electrical safety training documentation and
Wait, what
paramedical advice.
what goes through that?
Um,
What are you
uh,
talking about? What do you mean?
okay, so we got through with the inspections here
We
and the
got
practices and
we got
seeing if
through
they're following
we got through
the training.
110.4.
Yeah.
A.
Oh,
We got
I
through
was already down through.
110.4A. Right? We went through. I just want to. You started talking about things, so we got through 110.4A. We went through qualified person, and we didn't talk about the unqualified person.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
But
I'm looking at third level A.
third level
For third level A,
4. You're
which is
under
perform job safety planning.
4.
Yeah. We're through 110.4 or 110.4A1. We're through that.
110.4A1. So now you're moving to which one?
Two, real briefly,
Okay,
it'll say
2.
unqualified person, obviously,
Yep.
right?
But they
And
still
then,
need, and an unqualified person still needs to be familiar with electrical safety because
yeah,
that's an unqualified person from an electrical perspective,
yes.
right? So,
So, or people who are going to interact on
right.
or near.
Yeah.
So now you think of the secretary plugging in to a receptacle outlet. Is she interacting with
Yeah.
electricity?
Or you
Yeah.
have,
Does she need 70E training? No, but she needs some sort of training. What happens if that shorts out? What happens if the cord is damaged? How do I know if the cord is damaged? Just little bits like that,
yeah.
right?
But
They
then
need something.
yeah, but then you also have on a job site, it's not just the electrical trade that's there. You have the
Yeah.
structural people, the
Yep.
plumbers,
Yep.
the
Yep.
HVAC. So
Painters working near.
all of those individuals have to have some level of understanding of electrical safety related
Yeah.
practices. All right.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right. I'm good. So now you were going to additional training and
The
retraining?
additional training just tells us when, for example, a minimum of every 3 years. Should you do it every
Okay.
year? It's up to you. That'd be nice. Or when the individual is found not in compliance or they don't understand, right? Or there's
Yeah.
a new change in technology or a
Yeah.
work assignment or something. These are all common sense things that they've been able to put into a format that we can understand. But what I found the problem is people are scared to death of the standard. They don't know how to read it. They don't know what it's saying. And what
Gotcha.
our job is to show them, look, it's once you understand what is being said or how it's being said, it makes sense. And it's easy for you to go back through and here's chapter and verse.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. And of course, in parenthetical 4, it talks about the type of training in the classroom or on the site.
Yep.
And then in 5, the safety training documentation. All I'll say there is if you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
Oh, absolutely right. Yes.
Did that sum it up pretty good?
Absolutely.
Okay, the lockout tagout procedure uh, can kind of speak for itself a little bit there. What I want to do is jump over to look at parenthetical C for just a minute.
That's 110.4C,
110.4, parenthetical C.
emergency response training. All right.
Yes. Now, what does the first sentence say there, Tom?
Employees exposed. This is in C1, which is
Yeah.
contact release.
Yeah.
Employees exposed to electric shock hazards and those responsible for the safe release of victims from contact with energized electrical conductors or circuit boards shall be trained in methods of safe release.
Refresher training.
That's the second sentence. You said you read the first
Yeah.
sentence.
Okay. 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 Well, so when I break this down, and again, agree or not agree, I'm just showing you what it says.
Yeah.
It says employees exposed to electric shock hazards. That's everybody that's working.
So let me ask you though, that's not everybody.
Well, I mean, everybody that's working electrical on that. Okay, if it's
So,
energized,
but I could be working electrical and doing
mhm,
installations in a new environment and there is nothing energized, so I'm not exposed to a shock hazard.
right,
You
right.
would have a
Then this is those. That's why it says those that are exposed to electric shock hazard. If it's dead, there's no shock hazard.
yeah, yeah. So if you've established electrically safe, so if
Correct.
so, but now I guess to your point, if you're in the electrical industry, even if you're going to work, even if you're going to establish an electrically safe work condition all the time, if your philosophy is we don't do any energized work,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
still are doing energized work going through the
Because you have to
process
verify. Yeah.
of establishing an electrically safe work condition.
Yes.
So
Yes.
verifying absence of voltage is
Yes.
still that process of exposed work. So
Yep.
I would tend to, at first, I was like, well, not every electrical employee, but I mean, it's hard to ascertain which ones are not going to be
Exposed.
exposed. Right.
Well, if it's verified absence of voltage, then the only person that's exposed at the time is the one verifying the absence of voltage.
Yeah. You may,
But what I was
yeah,
showing there on those that are exposed to shock hazards, it makes a definition and those required for the safety release of victims. Because in parenthetical 2, it talks about emergency responders. But everyone should be able to know what to do for contact release. If they see somebody and can't let go, or
yeah.
if something's happening, I mean, what's your first impulse
Oh, the
when
first
somebody's in
impulse is to grab somebody, right? Is to
yeah,
That's the
right.
wrong thing to do.
Yeah. So do they have a rescue hook on the job site?
I'd
Well,
like a two
rescue.
by four.
Well, a 2x4 is fine, but how do you use the 2x4?
Oh, I swing away, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's the old adage that what you do when the boss gets in the can't let go. You go to lunch.
You go to lunch.
Anyway, I didn't
But
mean that
no,
to the boss
but
out there.
but you're right though. I mean, well, you're the CEO, um, but that's the key is you need those shepherd's
Yes.
hooks, right?
Yes.
And then you need to be trained
Yes.
because in some cases, if for example, if I sat down and said, "Oh yeah, I've used a shepherd hook. I know how to use a shepherd's hook," you hook the
Mhm.
guy and you pull him, but you're not in the right location to be able to
Right.
get that done. That means
Right.
you didn't think and anticipate that
You
you're
weren't
going.
trained and practiced ahead of time.
That's
How
right.
close can you get to the individual?
That's a good
Can you go
question.
up and stand right next to them?
Depends on
Okay.
the voltage levels and all that jazz.
That's exactly right. So the point is, this should be addressed, and I don't think it is being addressed, right? The way it should be.
Yeah.
And so anybody that's involved or that's exposed to electric shock hazards, first you've identified there's going to be one. You
That's
know how
right.
to recognize that, okay? And so then the next thing is using those. Okay, well, have you been trained on a job briefing that if something goes to go wrong, who knows where the breaker is that feeds the spider box? Who knows where the breaker is that feeds this circuit? Who's going to be involved in doing that? Who are going to alert? Because if you shut something off here, you might drop a whole bunch of stuff you don't realize you're killing power to.
Yeah.
That should be part of a job hazard analysis when you're going through that before the work starts.
That's exactly right. And you need, so what really demonstrates, this discussion right here demonstrates
Mhm.
how the National Electrical Code and 70E and
Yep.
70B work together because you may be relying on a one line diagram, right?
Yeah.
70B
Yep.
tells us if that one line exists, it needs to be up to date and accurate.
Hmm. Hmm.
70, the National Electrical Code requires proper labeling of the sources of circuits so
Right.
you could triangulate. You could say, well, you could compare. The one line says it's coming from this panel and this circuit, and the labeling on the equipment says it's coming from this panel and this circuit. Do they match? And if they don't,
Yeah.
red flags
Yeah.
go off, right?
Exactly.
But you
So to
need to
your point,
have.
one line diagrams, that's why we need the one line up to date one line.
Oh, absolutely right. And you have to have all of those ducks in a row before you start working.
Exactly.
It's almost Robert, like you have to plan for the worst case scenario.
That is exactly right because we do that with short circuits. We
Yeah.
plan for the worst case scenario. Why do we do that? Because this energy moves at the speed of light, and you can't do anything during an event. You
That's right.
must do it before the event. And after the event, you cannot change it. You cannot control the outcome once it starts.
You're
And
absolutely right.
because of the inherent nature of it, this is why it is so important. I've used this illustration with those that, oh man, this is a lot of stuff to keep up on. Well, how would you feel going into brain surgery if you found out that your surgeon wasn't really into continuing education and he had a 60% success rate? How would you feel about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly
Well, I
right.
mean, this energy will kill you just as quick and it's impartial. It doesn't
That's
care
it.
who you are, how good you look,
Yeah.
what your status in life is. It is that impartial, and you have to deal with it.
And
Like,
and how many years you've been in the business.
yeah,
Doesn't care.
and it
I
doesn't
mean,
matter if you've been doing it that way for 25 years or not. This
absolutely
time you
right.
did it incorrectly.
You're right, Robert. It takes one time. It's unforgiving.
So the last one there in 110.5, I don't know how much time we got, but it's just basically I had this
110.5?
question.
Wait, hold
Uh,
on. You said 110.5.
yes,
I
we're,
thought
we're
we were in
moving. Well,
110.4.
we were in parenthetical C 110.1, and then 110.2 focuses on those who are responsible
Yep.
for first aid, emergency response, and resuscitation. So they made a difference between contact release and these things,
Yep.
because these things in parenthetical 2, you have to go get special training for.
Right.
Well, you need some training for contact release on how to use the rescue hook, but you don't have to go to an outside source to get certified to do that like you would in
Right.
emergency training response. And CPR and the AED, defibrillator,
Yep.
automatic external. So
Yep.
somebody's going to be designated to be trained in that, and it gives you the different requirements as to how often to renew that, whatever the authority, like the Red Cross, wherever you got that from, that's what they're directing you to do. And then, of course, in parenthetical 3 on training verification, it says the employer or the employer shall verify at least annually that employee training required by 110.4C is correct.
That's
So
right.
regardless of whether they go for training every 2 years, the employer will check annually to make sure that that time hasn't gone past.
Yep.
Right.
And then 4 is documentation. If you don't
Right.
document it, it never
It
happens.
didn't happen.
Okay,
Yep.
so now you want to move to 110.5, host
I
and
just wanted to take
contractor
one at
employers
110.5 because that was on our
responsibilities.
list. Yeah.
Perfect.
And so it lays out very carefully the host employer's responsibilities. When you read through those, my favorite person, potential spam, is calling me every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and I really like the fact that they have broken it down very clear. That there's very little wiggle room here. It's pretty cut and dried. What is the host supposed to be doing? And it says he shall inform the contract employer of the following. And there's three things: known hazards,
Yep.
information about the employer's installation that the contractor employee needs in order to make assessments required by Chapter 1. And then 3, the host employer shall report observed contract employer violations of the standard to the contract employer. And then, of course, they'll have to take it from there. In parenthetical B, it tells you then what the contract employer's responsibilities are when these things happen.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense, because you go into a facility, you don't know really what's going on there to start with. So the host needs to tell you. He's
That's right.
responsible for letting you know. Then the contractor employer, it tells what to do from the very beginning. It says the contract employer shall ensure that each of his or her employees is instructed in the hazards communicated to the contractor employer by the host employer. That means there's going to be a meeting, right? You're going to have to get together or something. Somebody's
Yep.
going to have to meet with somebody. And then it goes on, it says in parenthetical 2, the contract employer shall ensure that each of his or her employees follows the work practices required by this standard and safety-related work rules required by the host employer.
Yep.
So, like you said before in some of your videos, uh, a good contractor who is a contractor will get together with the host and compare safety documents
Right.
to make sure they all line up together. The host may have more safety requirements than the contractor does, but guess what? You're in the host facility. You're going to follow his rules, right?
That's right.
Because that's what he wants. Okay. And remember the term AHJ, getting back a little bit to these standards just for a moment. The term AHJ stands for authority having jurisdiction. And a lot of us make the mistake, and I did for many years, that the AHJ was our electrical contract, or electrical inspector only. But in a building, there's the AHJ, the building inspector,
Yeah.
the, fire inspector, the insurance guy. I mean, there's a lot of different AHJs. And when the codes and documents use that term, they're not just referring to that specific AHJ, they're referring to AHJs, period. Right?
Yeah. I agree with you. The challenge is we're talking about a work practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have a third party inspector inspecting to this.
No, no. All I'm doing is bringing the information for you to consider.
That's right.
Because once again, you know who's going to consider it, regardless of which document it's in.
That's right.
And really, we're professionals, right?
Yeah. Supposed to
Like,
be.
well, yeah. Well, this is the way things should be, the way things are. We'll go back and look at our situation. Is there a way we can improve? Well, hopefully, by going through this, we will have been motivated, given some things to think about that we didn't know or think about before, kind of an aha moment, so to speak. And then take that information and go back and look. If for nothing else, maybe we cause some to look at their electrical safety program, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And
And
that's
if
the
one
key.
person was saved by it,
Oh, absolutely. One person saved, the one unplanned outage avoided, all those things. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and the responsibilities. You have the host employer has responsibilities. The
Mhm.
contract employer has responsibilities, and as individuals have responsibilities as well.
Yeah, and you know what the term responsibility is? Think about it. Responsibility, your ability to respond
Yeah,
to what you've learned.
yeah, you're right.
So I've actually had classes, I've been conducting classes since 2011 on 70E. And the contractor that I'm performing these classes to his clients, he basically went to them and said, look, we like to do your work, but until we can start doing it safely, we're not going to be able to do it. Now, that's a pretty big thing for an electrical contractor to tell his clients.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
this guy's been around for 110 years. So these other companies had just gotten started. So he talked them into coming to classes. Everybody's been on board. And now, if his guys don't follow the practices that his clients saw in class, they get together and talk about it, which is pretty gratifying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where that documentation comes into place there at the end. The whole idea is not to create extra paperwork, it's to save people's lives. We got to look at this as we're trying to save people's life or save them from the likelihood of occurrence and the severity of the outcome. We always got to keep that in the back of our mind. I mean,
That's the truth. And
you know,
yeah, and you said it earlier on that we're changing a culture.
yeah,
So it's not necessarily about somebody looking over your shoulder and enforcement of 70E and safe work practices.
yeah,
It's not about somebody standing over your shoulder and saying, "Oh, you didn't do this right," or "You should be doing that." It's you want to educate people because we all want to go home safely. And
yeah.
we don't want to hurt or injure ourselves or the individuals standing next to us, right?
And wind
So
up with family members being not there.
yeah,
You
it's
know,
exactly right. Yeah.
so
So
I've looked at this, and maybe you'll agree with me. It's like this whole journey from since Nfpa 70E was first put out there. It's like turning an ocean liner in a circle. It takes you
yeah,
40 miles to get around the circle.
yeah,
And as long as we keep trying, as long as we keep going forward, inch by inch or whatever,
right.
and as long as more things come, the more research they do with IEEE and things like that, the more things that are coming to light, the technologies, See, this is getting even more critical because of the technology out there changing
Yeah.
so rapidly.
Yeah, you're
Let's
absolutely
try
right.
and stay ahead of the game on it.
Now, you could say now another part of enforcement of education, right, for the
Mhm.
qualified person could be like if you get new equipment in,
Mhm.
or say 70 safe work practices, certificates that demonstrate the aspects of the qualified person, which one of them is education and knowledge,
Mhm.
right? But if I
Mhm.
had, let's say that as a gear manufacturer, I had a special piece of equipment and I offered training classes where I would bring, say, you or others in,
Mhm.
and you worked on the equipment in my lab, and I gave you a certification and I had a curriculum that demonstrated you had hands on
Yep.
building skills, that all of that could be evidence for the
Yes.
for the for the owner and the
Mhm.
contractor owner, right?
Yeah.
So you,
Absolutely.
all of that is should be documented and maintained so
Mhm.
that hopefully never, but as
Yeah.
should something happen, you could always go back and say, look,
Yes.
here was this education. I'm doing my due diligence. Will we make mistakes as human beings? Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But at least you show that track record that you are
Yes.
maintaining, you are following through with all of those details.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all very important pieces of the puzzle.
Well, and when you were down just recently, and was it Arizona at the safety conference, and the individual you were
Yeah,
talking to had the virtual training type of thing,
yeah.
and you were talking about they'll pull a
Oh
whole
yeah,
truck in and put them through. Now, with
yeah.
switchgear and things like that, I was just involved with a 13,200 piece of switchgear, medium voltage switchgear, and the people that were buying this went down to the plant and they walked them through and showed them how to maintain it, what to look for when they
Hmm.
get it up on the site, how to do the torquing, what's all this, that, and the other. Made sure all the insulation was all stuff there. But one of the companies, I don't know if it was Eaton or I know the Siemens do. They've got a whole trailer that they'll pull down for a price. But they'll pull that whole thing down and
Yeah,
give your people actual training,
yeah.
and not just on the equipment, but making splices, medium voltage splices for cables and elbows, and it
Absolutely.
takes a couple weeks worth of time, but it's well worth the effort.
Yeah. You know, the key thing is that multiple manufacturers. I know we have something like that. Schneider has something.
Yeah.
Siemens. I'm not sure. I'm sure ABB has something. Most manufacturers have some way to get education on the road. I was
Mhm.
at an IEEE meeting, and there was a gentleman. I forget what manufacturer they were doing. What do they call that when you for grounding and bonding, and they light the match and they powder and
Well, most people would
thermal
refer to
weld,
that as CAD weld,
CAD
but
welding.
Wait a
Yes.
minute, wait a minute. CAD weld
Uh,
is a brand name. It's
yeah.
exothermic welding.
Yeah, that's why I was going thermal welding,
Yep.
exothermal welding. So he was
Yep.
doing exothermal welding or CAD welding, whatever you want to call it. And he was there. He had all of the equipment, and if you look at that and say, if you want to be able to say, look, I demonstrated that I have done that type of welding in the past. I mean, it's not hard to do. You could as long
No,
you need a
but you still
qualified
need
person
some.
and you need some physical resources and some time.
Yep. So you qualified or they qualified those individuals to do that particular task because they stood there and watched them
That's right.
apply. And you got to know what size mold to get. You got to know how much powder to put in there. You got to know when to light it, how often to put it. The reason I'm bringing a lot of the stuff I did had the opportunity to work on a substation, and we did a grounding grid, and that's all we did for 3 weeks
Yeah. Oh yeah.
as well. That
Yeah.
grounding grid
Now,
together.
now, if you weld that grounding grid together and you do that for 3 weeks and you don't do it again for another 5 years,
That's another exact yes. That's it, and that's addressed in 70E. If you haven't done this in a
yeah,
year's worth of time, you need retraining.
yeah. And then the questions are, and I know there's some guidelines of
Yep.
how often, but it's so important. I think that we've got to get over the fact that it's not about am I what can I do to get out of training? It's
Hmm.
about, are you qualified for the work that you're about to
Yeah.
perform? Because you want to
Yeah.
do it, you got to do it correctly. Else
Yeah.
you put a lot of lives at risk. And
Yeah.
the risk may not be that there will be an immediate failure.
Oh,
That
yeah. It
failure
could.
could exist later.
Yeah. Yeah. A year later, 5 years
Yeah.
later, if you're going to get into a race car for the first time, you've been driving all your life. What is the first thing you're going to want to do? Well, go to training. Absolutely. I want
Yeah.
to know what's going on. I use this illustration in my classes, to demonstrate risk and things. I go, how many of you have seen a cobra? Now, not the car, the
Right.
snake.
Yeah.
Okay. You ever seen a cobra?
I have. Well, not personally. I've seen them on TV.
Okay. Okay. So here's the thing: is a cobra dangerous?
Well, I'm sure it is.
Okay. Why?
In fact, don't they have venom?
Yeah. And what can the venom do to you?
I don't know. I
It
don't
can
know.
kill you.
Oh, can it?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So most people know that.
Okay.
I mean, they just do.
I
My
know
next
it's not going to
question
be
is,
good.
how do you know that? Have you ever interacted with one?
Yeah.
And they'll say no. Well, then how did you know? Well, we read information and research. Well, okay. So now if this cobra were in the corner of your house
Yeah.
and you're standing in the other corner, what's your risk? Not very big.
Yeah.
But the minute you start moving towards that cobra, what happens to your risk?
It
It
goes
starts
up.
going up. Now
Absolutely.
questions come up. How close can I get before that thing strikes? What am I going to have to wear for PPE? And the list goes on.
Absolutely.
Well, the same way as an electrical panel or piece of equipment. Okay, that's a
Yep.
silent, invisible killer. You know it's dangerous, but
That's
most
right.
people don't seem to respect that.
Yeah.
They would a
Yeah.
cobra that they haven't seen, but not a piece of equipment that they've interacted with,
That's
right?
absolutely right. And then, or you take a person who's very familiar with a residential panel board, and you tell them, all right, now you're going to go, and I want you to work on and install or
Yeah,
establish an electrically safe work condition in a switchboard.
yeah,
And that switchboard has all of these different monitors on them. And then when you kill the main, you still see lights on, and you go, well,
yeah,
why are the
yeah,
lights still on? Well,
yeah,
you don't realize that there's a battery and there's
yeah,
a UPS inside. And
yeah,
then what's the voltage? Well, I don't know, right?
yeah, yeah.
Is it
Or a
24
generator
volts?
came on.
Yeah, or there was a generator, right? So you don't know the sources. So as things get complex, you don't know what you don't know. Being a qualified person is extremely important for yourself and for everybody around you.
And it's only as hard as I make it,
Yeah. 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 It's only,
right?
that's
It's
right.
only as hard as I make it. It
That's
could be,
exactly it.
I can say I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to say, do I have to learn it?
And
Two different ways.
the other hard part is to admit you're not qualified.
That's it.
And I'm telling
Our,
you,
our, yeah,
this
yeah,
book here and the
yeah,
and Vince Barlow, The Power of Emotional
yeah,
Intelligence, he's not an electrical person. And I was talking to him about his new book, and he was talking about emotional intelligence. He does coaching and things like that. And I
mhm,
thought it is so pertinent
yeah,
for the electrical industry
yeah,
and our discussion today about the qualified person, that whole the ability to say, I'm not qualified, the
yeah,
ability to take criticism, the
yeah,
ability to say, I've been doing it wrong for how long and I need to
yeah.
change the way I work as
Well,
you
and this
become
is this
qualified.
is constructive criticism.
Yeah,
Constructive, not let's get that
exactly.
clear.
And
We're not doing it to put people down, and that's the way people take it, and that's not what it at all.
but you said it earlier, it's how it's delivered.
Yes, yes,
It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
it's how you say it. Yep.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, this was a good discussion on the qualified person. I
You mean
enjoyed
it went okay?
it.
Well,
What?
when you're passionate about something,
Yeah.
you can speak from the heart, and you and I and everyone else speaks from their experience.
That's
If you
right.
can deliver in such a way, if it's passionate to us, that passion is catching. That enthusiasm is catching. And so to keep that level up, we got to keep feeding the fire, keep learning. And there's a statement that said, by let's see, iron sharpens iron. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Iron sharpens iron. So one man sharpens the face of another.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Okay, so now when they used to sharpen back in the day, way before they had whetstones, they would take the iron and they would pound it back to its sharpness.
Right.
Iron sharpens iron. When you do a whetstone, it takes the metal away.
Right.
It takes away, but when iron sharpens iron, you build the metal up. You don't
Ah,
take, you see what I'm saying?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
as we're interchanging different thoughts and different,
Yeah.
experiences that we're bringing to the table, and when you get the comments on this, hopefully people will take a look and throw some comments in there. They're going to bring some stuff to the table too.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Robert, we got through a session on the qualified person.
Thank you for letting me do this.
Well, I thank you for your expertise, your knowledge, and your passion for safety. I mean, you're out making a difference in the industry, and everybody needs to recognize that.
If you love what you're doing and people accept it, you see the light go in their eyes, you never work a day in your life. It doesn't matter. I've seen some instances where safety becomes a competition, education becomes a competition. That's not the way it should be.
No, I agree.
We're helping each other out to make the world a safer place to live.
I love it, and I couldn't close a session any better than that.
Well, we could close with a dumb joke, like what is the room in the hospital that the invisible man's the most afraid of?
The ER?
No, the ICU.
I see you. You just told me that, and I couldn't remember it.
I know, that's why I was trying to reiterate it.
I'm terrible with jokes. All right, Robert.
Thank you for everything that you do on this 1 hour program and behind the scenes. It takes a lot of work to do that. And I think I can say on behalf of all of us out here, it's not to give you a big head. Don't worry, if you get a big head, we'll come take care of you. But we do thank you for everything that you do. And we do appreciate the work that goes into it. So keep up the good work.
Will do, Robert. Thank you. And everybody out there, thank you for joining in during Shock Week. So stay safe and please stay healthy. I love it. All right. Thank you, Robert. And take care.